Hi everyone, hi Roy, hi Ramsey, hi everybody else that's watching. It's great to see you here. So let's get the show started. We're just getting ready. I think I've got everything on my list done. Yeah, okay. So welcome to the Conscious Creators Community Show 10 of Season 1. This show, we're going to be exploring the fascinating world of labels. And so why do we use them? What are they? What are helpful? Are they helpful or unhelpful? So my label for today is your host, and my other label is mentor and consultant. And so if you'd like to connect with me in any way, I am mattlove.business or mattlove.creator on Instagram and Facebook. And so everybody else, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I will just and answer the first question, which is, what are labels and why do we use them to describe ourselves and others? If we can stick to that question, that'd be really good. Sandy, you're first on my screen.
Sorry, it was still doing stuff with the chat underneath the video. Anyway, what are labels? The way I look at labels, it's like boxes, and we humans tend to place stuff in boxes or put labels on them to make sense and to have a reference to our reality. And that labeling can be not always what we think it is. So we can put a label on something or put something in a box and it doesn't belong in that box. So you start getting miscommunication, or you might be getting a wrong filtering regarding other people or yourself.
Brilliant, thank you. Hey, Sil, you are next on my screen.
I'm here. So
Brilliant.
I'm Sil from Way of Impeccability, or alternatively labeled the language of conceptuality. So for me, labels are tagging, hashtags, and therefore a means of sorting and appropriately compartmentalizing or shifting or putting things to where you know where they are, so that you are able to retrieve them, and not only retrieve them, but understand them and comprehend them. So a label makes all the difference in the world. For instance, I've relabeled the unknown to moreness. The same thing, one negative, one positive. So labeling is profound, and it's not necessarily negative. Labeling has come to be associated with us, but this is the power of labeling. We can change that association. And when we know how to do this and start to label things ourselves deliberately and consciously, we can change our entire reality and how we conceive and comprehend and therefore perceive and interact with that reality. Huge deal, huge deal.
Thank you, Sil. Yeah, huge deal indeed. And the fabulous Share Unbound.
I got it. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yay. Success today. Labels, to me, I find them to be interesting. I believe that they are a lazy way for us to describe what we don't understand, what isn't making sense to us. And that leads into why I believe that we use them, which is to identify or to make sense of, or to make a determination whether or not we're going to accept or reject someone or something. So there it is. Oh, by the way, I'm Cher Unbound, and that is who I am. I practice trauma recovery facilitation. So.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cher. I love that. Really good description. And Gabe, you're next.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here again. Gabe with Stress Relief for Teachers on Facebook, or everybody. Labels, yeah, labels, you know, as an educator, labels to me is, it's a way that we create an experience. If we give a label to something, it means something to us. And if it means something to us, we get more involved in it. So you got, you know, positive labels like Matt's a good guy, or, you know, Anthony Bellison is handsome, great labels. And we got the negative labels, right? So we learn to label stuff because they're adjectives and they create the experience that we are embellishing in, you know, based on thought and emotions. So it's a good thing. Doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we learn more bad than good, right? We get labeled, like I was labeled. Everybody's been labeled since childhood, right? I was labeled the poor kid, you know. I love this one because I lived in the New York area, you know, that Puerto Rican, yeah. So we grow up starting to believe negatively about our labels. And then, you know, it really starts to mess with our heads and our emotions. You know, it's all about personal development, right? And that's what we're talking about here. And labels are supposed to be positive if we want to achieve a greater version of ourselves. But we have to unlearn negative labels. And a lot of them, you know, we just really believe them because we just never questioned them all our lives. So now we do. And because we do, we can change that. We don't have to have bad labels. So that's how I feel about labels.
Yeah. Good, such a good point. I was the fat kid when I was younger, and I still pretty much look
Well,
the
you
same as I
really?
did. Yeah, I wasn't though. I just believed I was for most of my life. So, Jennifer, you're next on my screen.
Hello, my name is Jennifer. I'm from New York. My label is that I am a certified master hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, talk therapist, and educator. And I think that labels are a way of mental organization. It's how we organize, right? And talking about negative and positive labels, I think that like being mislabeled is a whole separate thing, right? Because like all labels aren't bad. Being mislabeled is horrible. Mislabeling someone or something else can make a problem. But I think that labels are necessary because they tell a story. Some of our labels, like if you say your title and what you do, it lets people know what you're interested in. You can assume certain things like correctly about a person based on a proper label, right? I mean, I think that, yeah, I think, and also it's attached to memory as well. The brain will not remember something without having it. You have to give it a word, you know, to categorize that thing as. So it's also attached to memory, and it's just about organizing things the same way you would in a filing cabinet. Think of your brain like a big filing cabinet, and you have to have all of the labels on there to know where everything is and what's inside each folder. That's what I think about.
Yeah,
labels.
imagine the medicine cabinet without labels.
Yeah, it would be a confusing place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It could be very dangerous
Something
or very
bad could happen,
exciting.
yeah.
I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, either way.
Anthony, you're next.
Hey, my name is Anthony Pallison. My labels, and I'll give a few, holistic peak performance coach, flow states coach, and hippie, to give a big different one. And it goes to show you learn a lot by people's chosen labels. And the reason I chose that is, for me, I completely agree with those that mention storytelling and labeling and putting into boxes. For me, there's also a layer of efficiency that goes to it. I could describe what I mean by hippie in 5 minutes, but if I just say the word, it's one word, and we'll leave it at that. And if anyone is interested in knowing more, then we can continue to the 5-minute conversation. But from my standpoint, yeah, the accuracy of labels is something, you know, that in two-way communication, and it has to be two-way, not only two-way communicated, but two-way understood, and checking that we understand each other. That's where really labels can be super efficient. And that's it for me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anthony. Great points there. Brenda, you are next.
Hello, my name is Brenda Johnston, and I guess my label is Shamanic and Energy Healer. And you can find me at torontoshaman.com. And my thought for labels was it's used to sort of categorize, clarify different roles and types and styles and characteristics of people. But the negative part, I guess, is that we've taken on labels from other people and other people's limiting beliefs, where we've taken race and religion and different types of people and stereotyped them and pigeonholed millions of people into a category. So we just have to shift, I guess, our labels to be our own personalized ones. A conscious awareness that just because somebody else uses this label, I'm not going to use a negative label. I'm going to learn about a person and find the true person and not label them something and dismiss them. And one thing I wanted to say about labels is when the label on your shirt is itching you like crazy all the time, that means you're really stressed and it's time to get some help, because that's what I was going through, cutting all the labels out of my shirts. Oh my God, it's itchy. Never itched before, just because you're just over sensitive to things. And that means you need to just ground yourself and dial down all the external stuff. So labels, good, positive, and sometimes itchy.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay. Anna.
I love you guys. This is so much fun. Okay, labels. First and foremost, I'm Anna. I am a visual language activator and a heartist, or an artist from the heart. So labels are interesting. Humans cannot avoid labels. This is how we make sense of the world. This is how we name things to understand and classify things in our world. So labels are unavoidable and sometimes necessary. However, I think labels become problematic when they are projections of our own limited understanding of things and people, and we project those faulty understandings on others. That's where we get into trouble. So yeah, labels are unavoidable, necessary, but they need to be used consciously, and even with ourselves. I mean, I just labeled myself in a couple of ways, but that's not all I am, and that is not really who I am at the core. And I will share later how I figured that out very recently with something that happened to me. Put all the labels into question. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was really good point there. I'm glad you made that point. Joey.
See if I can do this. All right. Hey. I am Joey Costa, or Joanne Costa, and I am the creator and teacher of Presence Manifest, which is an applied energetic philosophy. I agree with everything that's already been said. What I could add to that would be that labels for me are how we create reality, right? So if you take a label, it really is just a word, and a word is a name. And when we name things, we name things into creation. So it's really the primary building block for life. And so it's important, I think, that we can also distinguish between generalized labeling and specific labeling. So if we bring it back to, say, the medicine cabinet analogy, you could have a cabinet that has no writing on the outside, right? You don't know that there's medicine in it. Or you can have a cabinet that says medicine, but you open it up and there's a bunch of, it's like a generalized, everything inside just says medicine, right? But you don't know what it is or what it does. Or you can have like, you know, specific label as to what it is, but not what it does. And then you get more specific, more specific, more specific. And when you can get more specific with the labels you're using, then they can be extremely beneficial. But the more generalized labels tend to leave a lot for for influence and projection, right? So I would just add that there's also, so there's like a line of specific to generalization. And it's like the bigger folder that everything is in, or the most tiny, minute folder that's very specific. And those are the ones I like.
Brilliant. Love it. Yeah. General labels. Very good point. Paul, you're next on my screen.
Hello, I'm Paul. I'm a shamanic teacher and healer from the UK. I also own a pagan witchcraft and shamanism shop. You can find me on www.sacredcircles.co.uk. I want to open with a quote by Aleister Crowley, the 19th century occultist and madman, also genius. He said that we spell words and use words and spells because magic and language is so interconnected. So labels for me, they're words. They're words that we use to group people together, to classify them. And that's been used in some good ways, and that's been used in some really bad ways. Hitler's Germany, as an example. But each one of those labels becomes a story. And you can't just have the word. Let's take shaman, like for myself. I can say I'm a shaman. You've got Brenda, who's a shaman, but the way we do things might be completely different. But people attach a story to that. And then when you go, well, no, that's not what I do, well, then you can't be that because you don't fit this narrowly defined story. So in actual fact, for me, labels are like prisons that we place each other in. And what we do through labels is we actually limit limitless beings by pigeonholing them into little groups. In actual fact, if you were to get rid of all of the labels, and I talk about this so often, like get rid of all of your labels, like man, woman, your sexuality, your job, profession, whatever, get rid of it all and come right back down to your core qualities. That's who you actually are. Those labels, they're just masks that we wear on occasions, but those masks become prisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Gabe.
Sorry, I lost my whole everything.
That's okay.
You know, labels affect our perceptions in so many ways, right? And one of them is because it creates a meaning to us, and it's a personal thing. You know, nobody gives us that meaning. We create that on thought alone. So, you know, again, I like to try to keep things on the positive side because we all think in negative labels most times than not. And it's a natural thing. We don't think about it. We just know that we express ourselves and we label just about everything that we see. That's what it means to us. We experience this at a daily basis, and that's our reality. Our paradigm is based on labels and how we embellish on that and make it more real to us. So we change that, you know, and it's important to want to change that. You know, I used to use those labels growing up in my neighborhood, you know, and it creates those bad habits of criticizing and judging others. And this is not what you want to be at in terms of, again, personal growth, right? So as far as, you know, transformation goes, you want to change those labels. You want to have a better meaning when it comes to dealing with people, cultures, you know, the planet, nature, just about everything and anything, because it's just really the right and the healthy thing to do for oneself. So create a better habit of using better labels, and you'll probably be a happier person because of it. And you probably make somebody happy too along the way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gabe. And so, Don, you want to share with us?
I'm good.
Thank you, Gabe.
So, yeah, a lot of people, we've seen like the labels like attribute meaning, how labels can, you know, bring things into existence. I I'm at the position where I think all labels are illusions. Like the ultimate reality that we all live in, like labels can't touch it, but labels help us to move around and communicate and function in this dimension. But the ultimate reality, labels can't keep up. Like the moment you've spoken a label, it's incorrect because the ultimate reality is completely changing and shifting. And it's not within parameters or borders, it's just shifts. And the label just can't do that. And also labels, we haven't said is like, they've also been used a lot to mislead people with titles and say, yeah, we know in marketing, okay, we get like a big promise of something. What do you say is like quantum interstellar healing, you know, and it's a label, but it's not necessarily meaning. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Don. That's brilliant. And so, yeah, I mean, I mean, specifically to the question, what are labels and why do we use them to describe ourselves and others? I think is that they're just words, like other people have said, that we use to identify things so that we can try and understand. That's the way I look at labels, you know. They may not be right, but it helps us understand things. It helps us gauge things, and it helps us look at things. And like you say, try and understand what's going on right now, but things change. It's very true, Don. I think that is a very good point. So I'm just going to quickly jump in the comments because there's quite a few comments from you lovely people watching here. So we've got, let me just scroll back. Here we go. And so we've got Christine said, labels limit you and put you in a box. Just how we thought. And this was mentioned earlier about the boxes. And so she also said, when you define yourself by a label, you limit yourself to rediscovering a deeper knowing of who you truly are. And yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely how we many of us start out, labeling ourselves from the town where we grew up, the people we hang around with, goths or punks or these kind of things. And yeah, I mean, I think they also help us discover who we are as well, though, once we wear those labels for a long time and they don't work out. And I just thought I'd mention them. And also Brian's put their signposts. So that's an interesting perspective. Now, Sil, did you want to add something?
I did, very much. Labeling is a superpower. I really have to emphasize this. We go around labeling so casually and just so willy-nilly, but we don't realize what a power this is. I mean, it's a true superpower. For instance, if I label myself, say, well, you know, I'm sad. Well, because I'm also honest, I'm going to make every effort to make that self-label to be true. So I'm going to go around doing things that make me more sad or depressed or angry or whatever you label yourself. On the flip side, when we sort, well, like when we introduce ourselves, we say, I'm this, I'm that. If I were to say in a very limited way, I say, okay, let's say I'm a dad. That's not all of me. Yes, it's a part of me, but not all of me. So we have to also be very careful when we make our labels into a description, because descriptions tend to be the limiting and not all, as opposed to a conception. If I say, well, I'm a dad, compared to saying, say, I'm a spirit warrior, or I'm a life detective, or life engineer, whatever, right? An open conception. This is something that changes, it evolves, it grows. It's not pinned down, but descriptions, they tend to be tight and pinned down and therefore limiting. And this is the power of labeling. They can be descriptions or conceptions or a whole host of things. And when we understand this, we can learn to use them appropriately and not limit ourselves, not box ourselves, which is where the negative connotation with labeling has come from, because they've become descriptions, boxes, tightnesses, inhibitions, rather than an open-ended something that's always evolving and growing. So when we change this, especially with our self-labeling, to have self-conceptions that are evolutionary, open, furtherances, that's really where the power lies. You can truly change yourself by just changing your self-labeling.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Sil. Anna.
Thank you. now I'm kind of lost because everybody is saying such amazing things. I wanted to add that, taking from Paul, he spoke of words as being spells, and that's true. When we label something or someone, we definitely make a story about it, and we make a visual story in our minds of what and who we think they are, and that's really dangerous, because we're not them, we're not in their skin, we're not in their experience. So I try not to do that, because I don't like it when it's done to me. To be absolutely honest, I do not like labels. I think labels are restrictive. They're very dangerous. They can make people feel really small and pigeonholed. So I try not to label people. And just recently, I realized that I need to be careful with how I label myself, because I am so much more than any label. And I had something happen to me recently that made me question even what I value the most about myself, and the biggest label I put on myself. And so I had to ask myself, if I didn't have, if I didn't have those things, if I didn't have the ability to make art, if I lost the use of my hands, who would I be? And that's, that's really, I think, the question that we need to ask ourselves often, because who we are and what we are changes with time and circumstance. And when we think about that fact, we realize that there is something about us that is constant. When I hear people using labels for themselves and others, what I really hear is a need, a desire for connection. Even in disconnection, there is a desire for connection, because we're trying to, when we label someone in a negative way, we're trying to protect ourselves against something that we don't know anything about, and we're trying to know about it. So I'm not quite sure where I was going with that, but yeah, labels are useful, but they're really restrictive, and they really don't capture the essence of anything or anybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. Jennifer, and then we're going to quickly move on. Oh, she's gone. Oh, no, you've gone down there.
Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you just jumped around and I thought you'd gone.
Something important that I wanted to say in answer to the question the first time I spoke on it is, isn't all language labels? All words, when you really think about it, all words are labels. And without those labels, I hear a lot of people like coming down hard on the labels, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing, because one label that we all have is we are creators. Right? So if you don't like the way that label looks, you can just simply create another one. You can assign yourself a new label. Another thing I wanted to say is that labels are subjective, and they're based upon the perception of the person that's interpreting the label. Okay, so you might say, okay, like Anthony said hippie before. So there could be people that have like a negative connotation to the word attached to the word hippie, and other people that love and embrace hippies. And it can mean a variety of things. That same exact label can be either extremely positive, extremely negative. It's a broad spectrum, and there's a lot of stops on the road in between of perception on how you can look at any word. And without those words, the words, we would experience no feelings if we had no language. Think about that. What would life be without our feelings and our emotions? That's how our subconscious mind, that's how we communicate with ourselves. We hear or speak a word, and this ties into what Paul said about magic. We hear or speak a word, we generate a feeling automatically. That's just what the brain does. It generates a feeling based on our interpretation of that word. And that feeling shifts our energy, which is where the magic comes in. But I think that it would be impossible for us to live without them. That's all I want. We wouldn't, how would we speak? How would we communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads on really well to my next question. It's been covered off a little bit. So how do labels affect our perceptions of ourselves and others? And why is it important to be aware of their impact? So some of us have covered that off. I don't know if Joey, you want to sort of cover that off a bit as well as saying what you want to say?
Oh yeah, here I am. Okay. How can you repeat it? How does I was on a
so how do labels affect our perception of ourselves and others, and why is it important to be aware of the impact that labels have?
Well, labels affect our perception because they are templates, or they become the form of the templates that we experience through, right? So as Jen said, if I label something joyful, or I label something in a certain way, it's going to affect the way that I perceive it or experience it. So labels in general, I'm with Anna. I'm not against labels, but I do try very, very much so to remove as many as possible before I engage with things. So, because I know that they influence the way I experience and see and even taste things, right? So I try to make my experience as label-less as possible before I experience it. So labels to me are templates through which we experience, and they're created also through experience. So they are 100% tied to our experience of a human, of being human. So I would say the biggest lesson for me was when I stopped using them for a year. Like I went 100%, like anytime someone said, "Oh, you are," and said something about me, I'd say, "I'm Joey, nice to meet you." and I would just challenge this thing that they were placing on me, because I felt like they were placing like little stickers all over me all the time. And when I took a year and refused to sort of engage in that conversation, it was kind of like a social experiment, I got to know myself better, because I also couldn't fall into the predetermined experience that the label created, right? So, sorry, I had a lot of coffee today, guys.
Yeah, that's okay. I've not a coffee machine break. Anna.
I'm on my second cup, so I'm nice and bright and bushy-tailed. I want to expand on what Joy was talking about. I have struggled with labels pretty much my whole life, and I think most people relate to growing up being given labels that didn't feel very good. I had all kinds of labels. I was the savage. I was the electric mosquito. I was sometimes stupid, lazy, which is kind of funny, because if you're an electric mosquito, how can you be lazy? And moving to another country, new labels come in. I was called and viewed as shorty, spicy, hot Latina. I'm not even Latina. I might be spicy and hot, but not Latina. I mean, the thing is, labels have to be asked. And why do I say that? Because as you become more of who you are, you change your labels and you decide which ones you want to own. Like, I don't mind owning Shorty. I am short. There's no question about it. However, I don't really care when people call me Shorty in a way that is to define me as maybe less than others. So if I'm short, it means that I'm not like the tall people. I'm just the same as tall people, fat people, skinny people. I'm just a person. So for me, when I think of a label that I'm being given, I let people know if that's a label I want to own or want to reject. And when I'm dealing with others, I do the same thing. I actually ask them, are you comfortable with how I'm seeing you now? You know, this is really important right now because of the non-binary movement, where people are now defining who they are in terms of their identity, their sexuality, and there is now a new thing where people will actually come forward and label themselves. You know, I want to be seen as he, she, or they, or them, or whatever, right? And so I think it's important to ask people how they want to be labeled, so that they have agency, they have the choice to be seen the way they want to be seen. You know, the old saying, treat others the way you want to be treated, is BS, because they might not want to be treated the way you treat yourself. They want to be treated the way they want to be treated. So it is better to come from a place of inquiry, of curiosity, and ask people how they want to be seen. And to also, for yourself, to ask yourself constantly, how do I want to own these labels? Because I've owned some of them. You know, I totally own being electric mosquito. I don't mind. That's who I am. I'm always doing something. I'm always, you know, I'm a very active person. So I own it. It's a funny label and people might laugh at it. And I don't mind because it's mine and I have taken ownership of it. So it is really important to understand what labels you are allowing people to see you through and what labels people want to be seen through, if that made sense.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, and I think you made me reminded me of something my mum used to say, and she used to say, the truth hurts. And what I realized is the truth hurts until you're aware, until you accept the truth. Yeah, once you've accepted it, it no longer hurts. Yeah, so Gabe, you're next.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that as a Latino man, Ana, you are Latina. Everybody's Latino in the world. So thank you for...
I have to disagree with that.
It's in jest. It's in jest. It's with love and humor. No explanation. It's okay.
So I am Latin. I am of Latin descent, but I am not Latina. Latina is one from the New World. That's a mix of New World blood and Latin blood. I have no New World blood in me. So.
It was not intended as a bad label. It was positive. All Latinas are sexy. But anyway, let's address this labeling stuff and how it contributes to stereotypes and prejudices. Well, Anna's reaction pretty much affirms all of that, right? You know, it was not stereotypical. It's not prejudicial. Let me tell you why. I'll tell you a story when I was 13 years old. Where I was raised, okay, in the mid-70s, Saturday Night Fever came out. It was the hottest thing, if anybody ever remembers, John Travolta, the disco era. And everybody started to fashion that. Yeah, Sil remembers that. All right, Jennifer. So we all started to fashion that. And I was like 13 years old when that came out. And, you know, mom bought me the shoes with the big platform shoes for the guys, you know, with that nice polished vinyl. And I had the bell-bottom pants and the open shirt. Now, mind you, I'm 13. I actually have hair. I got no chest. And I'm hanging out with my friends on a Friday night in town. And we're walking through the streets. And we are 4 Latinos, 4 Spanish kids. And coming opposite us are 4 American kids. And what's interesting is that as we are crossing each other's paths, they yelled out to us the labels and the stereotypes and the prejudices, you know, death before disco, and, you know, I think they said Cubans at the time, you know, don't belong here, things like that. So how does that affect us? It affects us in a great way, because I was 13, man. I was fearful for my life. I was a complete, you know, wet noodle. You know, you yelled at me, I cringe. And I carried that for a long time, you know, and it starts to create that belief in people. Labels can be very detrimental for that reason, you know, if we start to believe them. But I grew up, and later on in my life, I realized that it's not true. So don't let labels get to you, because they will destroy your life in so many ways if we hang on to it. And the way to dismantle it is very simple. You just simply choose not to believe in those negative labels, because they're not true. Nobody is an authority on anyone else to be able to say you're a bad person, you're a good person, you're this, you're that, anything other than, you know, anything that's negative. So when we start to buy into that, it's because we are allowing ourselves to be victimized by somebody else's, you know, energy hoarding. So fight back, you know, and insist. Like I like to tell bullies, you know, you can be any way you want to be, but as long as you're not that way with me. So if I don't like a label, I let you know. Ana, thank you, because you let me know. You know, but I knew that already, by the way. But you're still Latina, okay? And embrace it. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, good points there, Gabe. Thank you very much. Sil.
So we have Ana power. Yeah, very cool. So the power of labels comes to me in the understanding that this power comes through association. Whenever we label, we are automatically associating it with a bunch of stuff. And that's why we don't care for labels put on us by others, because, man, you're now putting baggage on me and you're also limiting me. And when we really do this and have this power to associate, and we do so appropriately, then we can truly use this power. For instance, in what I do, it's very hard. People say, oh, what are you? What do you do? Facilitator, teacher, all of those are very limiting. I, for the longest time, thought of myself as an elucidator. Still, it's not accurate. I do more than just elucidate. I also create, I test, I experiment, I explore, I do all sorts of things. So when we have a label and an idea, an association, that just connects us to a few things that can be very limiting. And to tie in there to what Gabe said, to take this further. Yes, I may unhook from the labels others put on me. Problem is, they still have those labels. So I find it intensely useful to come up with self-descriptions, self-conceptions, which are associated with all. For instance, instead of calling myself all that, I say I'm a sentient being. End of story. What is a sentient being? Exactly. The fact that you ask and you don't know, it leaves it open-ended. A sentient being can be anything. Or I'm an evolver. Well, what are you evolving? Okay, well, that also leaves it very open. So I'm not limited, or to say I'm a process, or I am process, not even a process, just process. Any of these are open-ended. And that's the magic. Now, when you supply others with such open descriptions, such open labels, they have a way of conceiving of you that's not limited. So, for instance, when I was younger, I'd always like to say, you know what? You never know what I'm going to do. I might just do anything. I'll surprise you. And so I got a label. I gave myself this label, or put it on in their head, that I could surprise them. And that gave me great license to change, because otherwise people expect you to be the same all the time. And when you do change, you get resistance. So this point of labeling and having open-ended labels or self-conceptions, incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. Really big deal.
Thank you, Sil. Anthony? Did he just disappear? Oh, no, you're there. You're still muted. So
I lowered the hand and then started talking on mute.
yeah.
Great shares, everyone. Thank you. I want to kind of shout out to what Jennifer was saying earlier in labels as all language. It's something I totally agree with. And when we think about it, we can't speak about labels without speaking of language. And language is how we relate to one another. You know, other than body language, other than touch, it's really language that is going to be able to say, you know, what are these aspects of my whole life that I've been? What are my values? What do I care about more than this or that? And it leads to connection and love. And who doesn't want that? So, you know, one of the reasons to be aware of labels and how we perceive ourselves is to just have better relationships and better connect with others. And then there's one more thing that I wanted to mention on the mind-body connection. I am bipolar, but I'm not bipolar. I am not a disease. People say things like that because it tells someone else, okay, this is what that means. There's a whole bunch of assumptions that are linked to that. But the mind and body are very much connected, and most people will be familiar with the placebo effect, or, you know, the sugar pill thing. When we do an experiment and take a sugar pill and you get a positive effect, even though you don't expect it. Less known, the opposite is also true, and it's called the nocebo effect. You can have a sugar pill that brings a negative effect. The point is, the label that you identify, you know, whether it's a descriptive label of yourself, or whether it's any other label, including, you know, medications, disease, and all of that. Because the mind and the body are so connected, then you can end up having either positively reinforcing or negatively reinforcing cycles that either benefit or don't benefit your life. So it's also incredibly beneficial to be aware of these things and figuring out what labels are serving you and what ones are not serving you. And as for the bipolar, I say that I have experienced bipolar symptoms, if I want to be more precise in my language, but I don't, unless I'm just getting to know someone and it's a really quick interaction. I wouldn't say I am bipolar. That's not a label that I identify with. But bringing back to my first point, it's efficient to say that, because nobody really talks like, oh, you have experienced this kind of symptom. But that level of precision, you know, really helps in being able to build an unbiased picture of someone and creating an unbiased picture of yourself when communicating to someone.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love it. And I think the thing that I really took away from that is it's not the label, it's how we identify with the label that actually causes the harm. The fabulous
100%.
share. Yeah, the fabulous share, you're next.
There we go. I had to unmute myself. I have this need to say the question again, because I wonder if we, I almost forgot it. The question was, is how do they, you know, how do labels affect my perceptions, and why is it important to be aware of the impact? I want to keep it really short. The first thing that comes to mind out of everything that everybody has said is, you do you, boo. I mean, it's just, it always comes back to me that this is all about, labels are about how we perceive ourselves, the way we want others to perceive us, and then unfortunately how others do perceive us and attach those labels to us. So moving off of that, how do they affect me personally? My perceptions in the past, labels that were given to me were confusing, deceiving, mind warping. limiting and many times frightening, especially when you don't understand what the full depth of that label is that's being applied to you, whether it's a survivor, victim. I'll share the rest later. There are some really negative labels, and fear. Sometimes these labels can bring a level of fear. And when we don't understand what people are saying about us, or we don't understand the label, how are we going to understand who we are as we try and move forward and describe who we are? So that's one of the reasons I like to, I learned this from Sil. He has repeated over and over and over again the word practice. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out exactly what he was always talking about practicing. Well, this is coming now from this aspect of labeling. I don't want to practice that I am in trauma recovery. I'm not practice. I don't want to say that I am recovering from trauma. I don't want to say that I have PTSD or that that I am X, Y, or Z. Instead, I am adopting that I practice. I am practicing my recovery because it's a daily, everyday process. This is never going to end. I'll always be in recovery, but I can also see it with a real positive frame of mind when I take away the negative levels, negative labels that are associated with PTSD, with survivors, with victims. So I want to wrap this up really quick by saying that with me, it all accumulates to a process of unbinding myself from my false beliefs, that the labels that were put on me as a child, as a teen, as a woman trying to escape domestic violence and everything else, I'm unbinding from those actively. And so that leaves me with the one label that I'm always in practice. And I'm practicing living, I'm practicing being, and I'm practicing doing life every minute. Damn, is it exciting. So there it is. There's me.
Love it. Thank you, Cher. Wow, look at the audience and everyone going wild. Really amazing. So Sander, you're next.
Yeah. Pretty. Sorry. It's pretty much been talking about labels we put outside of ourselves and how that affects us or the other person, but it's similar to labels that we put inside of ourselves or project on others how they are feeling. And I'm talking about emotions here, because what I experienced myself going through my own process of becoming more freer and working on myself is that the labels that I had for certain emotions were not the right labels. Because I would say, oh, I'm sad, but it was more than only being sad or more than only being angry or happy. So by changing your perception and also getting to know yourself better, and also to get to know another person better, there is this deepening in that relationship because of the removal of the standard labeling we have been taught as children or when we were younger. And when you do that, there's also a communication coming up where there is less words or less labeling needed to understand what the other person is meaning or is trying to say. And the same thing goes for you as well.
Good point. Yeah, really good point. And Don, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, there was a few things. So when we're talking about like labels affect our perception of ourselves and others, we're talking in some ways about identity. identity politics, aren't we? And I think we may have noticed over the past 2 years how dangerous and how difficult it is to get into that. You know, we've been able to see like the real complication there is in having labels for people like them or they, and how people perceive that from different ends, and where is the freedom of choice for the person picking an identity, and the freedom of choice for someone having to use and to apply that identity. But yeah, I would say that, yeah, the whole subject is very difficult, and it's important that we really don't rely on a label paradigm. You know, as living beings, you know, we operate and we function by, and we're recognized by what we do, and that should be like a primary way of how we discern the world and each other, rather than depending on labels. The labels can be a quick, you could say, lazy way for us to communicate and share about each other. But yeah, it's very important to really go deeper and try and find that deeper reality of life and nature, and see where things are transforming into, and rather than fixating on a static moment through labeling a person. Yeah, which is I can't. We were saying, you know, labels should be open, but you know, I think labeling a person, a living being, is like one of the worst things you could do in a way, because it's kind of applying that they are unchanging at that point. But yeah, if we can have open labels, that's definitely going to be better than fixed, closed ones.
Great point, Don. Thank you. Anna, artist.
You noticed I changed my label.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, I've been thinking about three points that came up to me very strongly. The first one is in response to Anthony and Cher, the fabulous Cher Unbound, about what we practice, we become. I have been chronically depressed my entire life. And for a long time, I identified with that. I'm a depressed person. And I had a really interesting thing happen to me a few years ago, where something happened. I don't remember exactly why or how, but I was able to see myself outside of myself, looking at myself when I was in a depressive state. And I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was, I have depression, but I am not depressed. I am not depression. So what I realized at that point was that I had been practicing being depressed for a long, long time. And also that I was something completely different from that label, which was a joyful person. And it was that joyful part of me that actually allowed me to survive a lifetime of depression. So now I practice being joyful. The second point I wanted to make is that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. So when people put labels on you, it is out of fear. And I'll give you a really interesting example of that. Sometimes that fear is disguised in love. I was born in Africa to white parents, but I was born in Africa. I was the first one in my father's family to be born in Africa. My father's family is very fair-skinned. They have blue eyes, reddish hair. So from a very young age, I was labeled as, it's Portuguese, but the translation means second-class white. And I remember confronting my family about that. Why do you call me that, second-class white? And they said, well, that's a term of endearment. This is what mainlanders, or people who are born in Portugal, continental Portugal, call the white people that were born in Africa. And I was like, that makes no sense to me. But I later asked my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and they said, yes, that's exactly what we all used for a long time to refer to white people who were born in Africa. And I'm like, that is so weird. And it was a term of endearment, meaning they were doing it out of love, but that love was rooted in fear. The fear of the other, the fear of basically Black people, African people. It's really interesting what we do to ourselves out of fear and what we do to others. The third thing I wanted to say is one of my favorite quotes of all time is Walt Whitman's, when he says, do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. This is how I see myself. I am not one thing. I am everything and all things, all at once. And all of those things manifest themselves at certain times, at certain points in my life, in my being in this world, depending on what is happening and what I'm doing. So I like that definition of what I would like is for me to be able to have a little label for myself where instead of saying, I define myself as she, her, or they, them, I want to define myself as we. Can I do that?
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, really great point. Brenda, you're next.
Hi, so the question was, how do labels affect our perception of ourselves and others? And why is it important to be aware of their impact? So my thoughts are, we use the past and other people's opinions to create our beliefs and our perceptions of the world. And we can be using prejudiced and limiting beliefs to put people down. I guess we've talked about it here, but it also limits their growth and their awareness and the ability to express themselves. So I had a label put on me as a child that I was stupid and would never amount to anything. And that was a horrible thing that my mother's husband had said to me, and it followed me for many, many, many years. And it was hard to break that. I didn't go to university because why should I? I'm stupid and I'll never amount to anything. I'd just be wasting my time. And it had so much impact on me. And it was horrible that somebody had put that on me and an adult that should know better. So I think for me, if we really take the time to shift our beliefs and incorporate our own story and experiences and just take every day and every interaction with people to allow them to express themselves and just see them the way they are, as somebody said here, see them, people how they want to be seen and how they are, it would open things up a lot more instead of projecting something on them. And if you do project something on, don't say it out loud. You don't need to hurt somebody and scar them by projecting something that you don't even own yourself. You know, you've picked it up from somewhere else. So I think it's very positive to just be open to interact with people. Each day is a new day. Like people have said here, people change. So each day is a new day. And just be open and aware of the impact of your statements to other people to allow them to shine.
Definitely. Yeah, it's how the labels are used. I agree. And Paul, you are next.
So I think one of the things about labels that I don't know I struggle with, but it's something I'm very observant of. You know, most people identify themselves through a shifting collection of labels. And I talk about this often: gender, orientation, job, religion, political views. And people, it really becomes entrenched in who they are. So they'll go, hello, my name's Bob, I'm this, that, and the other. And let's say, for example, you're a doctor, right? And everywhere you went, wherever you go, you're like, hello, I'm this, I'm a doctor. People, oh, wow, it's really amazing. It kind of becomes a story in how you interact with people. And that becomes so entrenched in who you are until that moment that you lose the ability to call yourself that. So perhaps you lose your job for one reason or another. Then you're no longer able to express yourself in that way. Your entire identity shifts, it crumbles and it falls. And we do this to ourselves so often. We did this idea, like lots of people said, like labels can be really positive. Yes, they can. But also labels in a way, like we all said, they can also limit us. They also limit our being. And if we only identify ourselves through these labels, what happens when these labels no longer make any sense to us? Our entire identity crumbles. It comes under duress. And our entire perception of ourselves then shifts. Then we've gone from being a success, so now we're a failure with this, with that. It changes. And I think one of the things that we really need to be very, very careful when it comes to labels is that you could sit there, for example, Matt, and you could say, hello, I'm Matt, I'm a digital creator, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. But I'm never going to know exactly who you are until I actually sit with you and hear your story. So labels are really good. They're like a cheat sheet. Like, oh, yeah, okay, so you're in your 40s, you're male, you live in Europe, cool, yep, I can identify all them things. I don't know who you are until we, like, really delve in. And the thing is, like, if you really want to know who the person is, sit with that person for 20 minutes and don't say a word. Just look at each other and think about all the stories that you're telling yourself about what you know and how you're not spending those few moments just absorbing that person's presence. Because if you spend less time with the story in your mind and more time absorbing their presence, you'll learn more. And then if that person just tags on their story at the end of that, boom, you don't need labels because you already know far more than those 5 little words could ever tell you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And you made me realize actually how dangerous labels can be, because you can create relationships with people based on, oh, yeah, we've got this in common, that in common. This is based on those labels you've been sharing. And actually, you know, you need to really know their qualities, their values. So it's really good. And there's so many comments. I'm struggling to keep up, but they're really good comments. So please keep them coming in. And thank you to everyone that's watching. It's been a really interesting show. So I want to sort of go on from what Paul was just saying there. So kind of labels tend to stereotype and create prejudice. And so what can we do to challenge and dismantle that prejudice and the stereotypes formed by labels? So how do labels contribute to stereotypes and prejudice, and how can we challenge and dismantle them? Anna, I think you're next. Not sure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Matt. I think a really good way to avoid labels and dismantle them is what Paul touched on. I learned this past year. I was in a training about emotional mastery. It was fantastic. I learned so much about myself and about my own emotions and how to manage them. And one of the interesting exercises we did was to learn to listen from an empty place. And that's what Paul was talking about, to actually just hear what a person is hearing without making a story in your head. And the way you do that is to, of course, when a thought comes in, oh, this is what this is about, let it go. And just really listen to the person And the second part of this listening is mirroring, where you repeat back to the person exactly what that person said in their words, and asking them, did I get it right? This way is a way to allow the person to show you and tell you who they truly are without you making a story about them. That's it. That's all I wanted to share.
Brilliant. No, thank you, Anna. And Joey, you are next on my screen.
I think the way to help dismantle them is the way we change anything in our world, which is, you know, how we act and what we believe. So my experiment of the year that I was anti-label, it was really good because the conversations that came out of it when I heard something that was a generalized set of description or identity applied to myself or applied to somebody else in my presence, I chose to go deeper into the conversation, or I chose to make it apparent that, yes, you would think that that label would make sense for me because of XYZ, but this is, you know, or I'd even go more curious. I'd say, well, what does that mean to you? Right? Because I tried to figure out what somebody else's definition of a label was. And then I can say if I agreed or if I didn't agree with what they were saying. So curiosity and questioning and speaking up, you know, and not in like a defensive, you know, your label is wrong kind of way, but just, that's curious that you would think that I'm a hippie. Why would you say that? Right? And then you could figure out why somebody believes this, and then you can have a conversation, and then you can find those things in the conversation that you really connect with, and then you can become better friends with people, or you can realize you don't have a lot in common at all. And maybe it's not the best person to be spending your time with because they chose you on a labeling system that doesn't really match. So yeah, that would be my conversation, and direct conversation that comes from a standpoint of a fluid, non-strictly identified place, and allowing yourself to be surprised at who you are too, because we forget that. Like, we forget that sometimes there's things that we don't know about ourselves yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. So very true. Yeah, I mean, could have said, I pretty much agree with you 100% there. So, Sil, you're next.
How do labels contribute to stereotypes and prejudice? By being divisive, by not being inclusive, right? So the moment I make a label and I put myself into a category and you're in another category, well, what happens? Look at our basic psychology. I call it the mentality of opposites. So if something is not good, automatically in the mentality of opposites, it's automatically bad. Something's not black, it's white. Of course, this isn't actually true, but that's how many think. So if you're in a different category to me and my category is good, well, therefore that makes you bad. See, so this is how we come to see difference as a negative, by having this exclusionariness and not being inclusive. So what can we do about this? We can press against labels that are not inclusive, that are exclusive, right? So make an effort to have labels that are inclusive. For instance, we could say, well, instead of saying I'm a this, I'm a that, say, well, aren't we all just people? And then I know my friend Cheryl is going to say, yeah, but you know what? And Cher's going to say, but Lou's a person too. In other words, they're dogs, right? So fine. All right. Now, well, okay. We're not taking. So let's expand that definition. Instead of people, we say sentient beings. Now we can include the dogs and the cats and the parrots and the turtles and the dolphish and whatever. right? So inclusivity, that's the key. That's how we can combat stereotype and prejudice, by being inclusive, collaborative. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Oh, I got one little fun thing about labels real quick, sorry. Yeah. People say, well, what are you with the accent? I say, I'm African American. What? Well, I said, well, you know what? Well, I was born in Africa. I'm 17th generation. My ancestors were also born and bred in Africa. That makes me more African than the average American is American. And I've been in America half my life. How does that not make me African American? See, labels. We've got to be very careful with labels that can be divisive, but we must be careful of them. Yeah. Be inclusive. Be inclusive. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Great story. Still great example. Paul.
Oh, I love what Sil just said. That's brilliant, because instantly in everyone's mind, it's like African American. They're all like the people of color. They're not white people. So I love that. That was great. I think one of the great things about challenging ourselves, like when we're looking at labels, and all of us do this, right? Of like, I couldn't sit here and go, oh, I'd never judge anyone. I'd never stereotypical, because that would be a complete lie. Because we all do it. Because the moment we say something, our mind starts making connections, right? And those connections are always the stories. If you want to break down stereotypical thinking, get a pen and piece of paper. It's my best tools, right? Pen, paper. If you've got pen and paper, you can change the world, right? Think of 5 groupings, or 10, or as many as you can think of, the way people classify each other. When I talk about, again, I do this a lot. So think about people like gender, ethnic background, social economic status, whatever, all of those things, the ways we try to classify people. Because when we talk about labels being bad and being stereotypical, what's we're talking about? We're talking about the classifications and the groupings, not the individual, like I'm a shaman, I'm a healer, I'm an energy worker. It's like, you know, the big stuff. And then think of the stories you tell about yourself when talking about that. And I'm a little bit hesitant to do this, but here we go. As a gay man, right? Whenever I tell people this, they go, God, I never would have thought you were a gay man, because in their mind, they have a specific idea about what I should be like. I should be decked out in pink with a feather boa and, you know, dancing along to show tunes, not being a goth or whatever. So people have this perception in their mind. And it's the same with like women who want to stay at home and be mothers. Instantly they create some kind of idea or story, like she's anti-feminist and, you know, she wants to bring everyone back to the dark ages or whatever. So we all have these stories, these connections in our head. You want to break down stereotypes? Get that pen, get that paper, think of 10 particular groups or groupings of people, and then write what you honestly believe about that, and then challenge yourself. Is it true? And is it real? Or did you just see it on Netflix or in some silly rom-com or read it in a book somewhere? And then apply that to your life, like apply that new understanding. Because the more we learn, the more we delve, the more we try to seek to understand each other, not on that surface level, but on a deeper level. Like, again, no 2 people's experience of being a man is going to be the same as no 2 people's experience of being a teacher will be the same. So everyone is a unique individual. 7 billion people on this planet, 7 billion different stories, all with labels and ideas attached to them. That would be my suggestion of breaking down those stereotypes and challenging them.
Yeah, great suggestion there. Really, really great suggestion, and great examples as well. Gabe.
Yeah, I agree with everybody. And there's a little bit of everything that everybody says that's just on point. And what Paul just said about challenging labels, I totally agree. And I tell that to people every day. You know, how we think, how we act, how we feel, that creates our, you know, in quotes, reality, our labeled reality. And, you know, our labels don't come with a country flag. They don't come with a culture, a religion perspective. They don't come with politics. It's just down spiraling emotional energies when we use them in a negative context. So you want to dismantle labels, you got to dismantle them with awareness. I mean, we become aware that we don't like the way this label feels. So we don't have to serve that label. We can flip it, you know. I mean, I carried a lot of, insecurities in my life because of labels. It's a heavy load, and we're aware of that. So we can change that. You just change the label. You don't need anybody's permission. You can simply challenge yourself and simply say, I am not this, or I am the opposite of this, and have a mental rehearsal of that and create that new label, that new meaning that inspires you to raise those vibrations. And anything that, again, is down spiraling and labels that are negative, if they don't serve you, let them go. Letting go is easy. But if it's not easy, ask for help. That's why we're here. Because a lot of people have a tough time letting go of those stigmas, and nobody's special to that. We've all been stigmatized because we've all been labeling each other. We learned to do that, but it's nobody's fault. Nobody's going to be mad at you, But if you're aware that you have this stigma and you have the solutions to change that, then challenge yourself to change that. Is probably one of the best things that we do for ourselves. And that's my take on that.
Thank you, Gabe. Really great points. Brenda, you're next.
Yeah, hi. So the question was, how do labels contribute to stereotypes and prejudice, and how do we challenge and dismantle that? So building on what Paul had said, a person labels themselves as a doctor, or an engineer, a lawyer, a pilot, an actor, anything. But when they retire, they struggle with their identity. And some of them feel their life has no value. And it's a shame because they only contributed to that awareness of themselves. They pigeonholed themselves in a label, and they put so much of their life into that one action. So not always, but I mean, I've heard of some people that have done this quite, it's quite destructive to themselves when they retire. So it's sad that they weren't given the opportunity to learn and discover and express themselves as who they truly are and what their gifts and talents are, besides that one label, how they describe themselves, and that maybe they have hundreds of components of their authentic self, or as Sil said, sentient being. So instead of person, sentient being, whether it's dogs, cats, whales, dolphins, maybe even trees, who knows, everything is supposed to have some kind of awareness. And so getting to know and interact with all these beings of any kind, even people are interacting with interdimensional beings, with an open heart and with honesty, respect, and authenticity, and just, as they've said here, just be open to listen and create your own beliefs about people instead of something that you've heard, read, or inherited. And I think
nice.
that would help.
Great one. Yeah, really good point there. Anthony, you're next.
So until someone does the survey of every single human being in the world, you don't really know what the trends and statistics are like. And it's absolutely impossible to do, for one, because materially, economically, and logistically, it's not possible. And number two, even if you did, even if I could snap my finger and say, boom, we collected all this data for the whole world right now about everyone's labels on multiple things like their age, their gender, their identity, their job, their blah, 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 blah. That survey would only be valid for this second in time. Tomorrow, it might no longer be valid. And so my point with all of this is, if you're going to make the thing about stereotypes and prejudices, right? They come from lots of different things. Some of them are a little bit statistically valid. Some of them are not. Some of them are rooted in, all the horrible things that we've done collectively as a species, racism being one of them. And I don't want to, bring a whole list. But my point is, you've got to have that fine line between what is statistically significant, what makes sense, and what is assumed or what is created from your own mind. And if you want to be as as open-hearted and as conscientious in your communication, using labels and also labeling yourself, and also using labels with others, or understanding someone's labels better, you can really build your understanding of someone through a blank slate. Assume there is absolutely nothing that is a given about them. And through asking questions, you figure out one tiny little aspect of each thing at a time. And it takes a long time, but it's, as unbiased as it gets when you're able to separate all the assumptions that you make. Like, if you're from someplace, what does being from someplace mean? Does it mean you grew up there? Does it mean you were born there? Does it mean you have blood that's from there? So this is what I mean when asking a question like, where are you from, is loaded with assumptions, whereas in what town or city, state, blah, 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 were you born, is a bit more specific and less prone to bias. So if you can be conscientious of the way you phrase questions so as to minimize the amount of bias in your questions, you'll be able to build a more objective picture that's a bit less stigmatizing, or, can be less interpreted in negative ways. But yeah, that's my little share on this one.
Thank you, Anthony. And Jennifer?
I was going to say pretty much the same thing that Anthony said. I think that in answer to what can we do to challenge and dismantle labels, I think the solution to that is to label everyone as an individual, and including yourself, and an individual that's capable of change at any time. And any judgments that you make after that should be based on information that you accurately gathered straight from the horse's mouth, straight from that person. Their thoughts, their feelings, the things that they do out there in the world, how they interact with others. Those are things that will tell you more about who that person is. But at the end of the day, we're all an individual, Anything else that we approach a person or a situation with, we can be doing more harm than good, as far as, because we might not be seeing things for the way they actually are. As a matter of fact, we never are, unless we're judging people that way, person to person basis. That's it.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's awesome. And Sil?
I asked a friend of mine if he ever experienced prejudice. And he said, no, never. Or discrimination? No, never. Now, the thing is, my friend is a biker, and all his friends that he hangs out with are also bikers. And, they look like extras from a Hells Angels movie. So he said, no, never. But the reason I asked is because my friend and all of his friends are also gay. Makes a big point about labeling and our perceptions, right? So he responded from the biker point, not from the gay point. It's just an interesting point. But what I really wanted to add on to this, what we can do to deal with this, is to really pay attention to the most horrible label ever. And this is should. Boy, all words are labels, right? So let's understand that. But should gets us into a mindset of doing things according to somebody else's idea of how they wish to label the world and associate the world and connect the world. So when we unhook from should, I just thrown it out of my vocabulary. That's it. Don't use that word anymore. It's very liberating. Right, Cher? Very liberating, very powerful. So anyway, should, very powerful label that helps us to deal with all sorts of prejudice and discrimination. Yeah, getting rid of it.
Thank you, Sil. Awesome. And Joey?
I wanted to add, in terms of how to break and challenge and dismantle prejudice and bias, one of my practices, because when Paul was speaking about pick the pick the ideas, and then, you know, you can label someone with gender, you can label someone with sexuality. It reminded me of a talk that I give about experience. And then everybody else just sort of funneled it right to this point, which is great. So like Jen was speaking, if we come at everything as we are individuals, right? And then if you take it deeper than that, if we come to every moment as it is its own unique experience, its own individual experience, right? So we could just keep bringing it down to the present, where we're assuming the least and we're curious and open to the most possibility in each moment. And how we do it is by stripping off these labels or these identities or these templates. And labels in my energetic practice show up as forms. And how I've described this to people is that if you walk up to someone, right, you've never met before, for a split second, that person is a unique individual, right? And that's kind of where you want to meet them, right? But what happens is we create our reality by defining it. So our first we'll say, oh, well, they're a woman. Okay, so here comes the woman story and identity. Oh, and they have blonde hair. Okay. Oh, and they look like my aunt, who I really don't like, or, and they're dressed like this. So it's like within seconds, we've put these filters between, we've put these blocks between connection of the two individuals, because these things, they just sort of come down, and they come down subconsciously. So in my practice that I teach, one of the things that I suggest to everybody is that as you're walking towards something, if you want to have the most unbiased, intimate, and present experience of it, you can say to yourself, or choose for yourself, however you want to word that you are going to end the experience to date of this particular thing or this particular person. Because if you end your experience to date and you tell your mind, I'm ending my experience to date of this individual, your mind automatically will go, oh, okay, so we're going to have a new experience. And even if it's for a slight second, it pushes those filters out of the way, and you really are able to connect without the bias. So I would add that as something that we can definitely do, is as you walk towards something, or as you're thinking of something, or as you notice judgment or bias or labeling come up, end your experience of either that label, that bias, or the actual individual. And you will find that you will come into awareness of a lot of new information, and information that pertains to that particular moment and that particular experience and that particular connection. So those words, I end my experience of, just kind of helps you clean your lenses.
I don't know if we're still broadcasting live. Can anyone see us on Facebook? Just quickly, because my internet just went unstable. All of you froze.
Yeah, I can still see
It
it.
still says live
Brilliant.
in my corner. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry about that, everybody who's
No
watching
worries.
live. I can't see us anymore, so I've lost everything. And I thought we'd been disconnected. Brilliant. So Anna, you're next.
Thank you, Matt. I wanted to add that as human beings, we are not static. We are dynamic in our being. We're changing all the time. And it is our responsibility to project and to show people how we want to be seen. And because we are dynamic, and because this changes all the time, it's important to practice self-inquiry and, ask yourself, who am I being today, and how do I want to be seen? And to educate people, because sometimes you adopt a label and people misconstrue that label. For instance, one of the labels that I own is I'm a polyamorous person. Now, immediately, most people, when they hear that, they think, oh, she likes to have sex with everybody. So it's my responsibility to educate people and let them know what I mean by that. And if you guys want to know, you can ask me, not here. Also, one of my labels or one of my manifestations is I'm a teacher and I work a lot with young people. And in terms of dismantling stereotypes and prejudices, what I've decided to do is to lead by example. So for instance, yesterday I was a substitute teacher at somebody else's classroom, which is always a challenge because you can never live up to the actual teacher, and children will immediately start judging you as soon as you enter the classroom, because they want to see, you know, is she going to be nice like my teacher? Is she going to be disciplinarian like my teacher? You know, they immediately start comparing you. And what I do in that situation is I let them know, I understand this is a strange situation and you are expecting your teacher, and I can never be your teacher because I can't be anything else but myself. So I will enter into a contract with these children immediately, and I will promise them, look, I will be my very best self, and you will be your very best selves. And it's a wonderful contract because children naturally step up to the challenge of being their best selves. And so they will be very authentic and they will show you exactly who they are. And so for me, this is a way of modeling for them how to tap into themselves, how to become curious about who they are, and to show up as they are in spite of any label, or even owning their own labels. So self-inquiry and leading by example, I think, are really good ways to dismantle and challenge stereotypes and labels.
Thank you, Anna. And Sil, did you want to add something to that? And then we're going to move on. Or?
Yes. One way to really deal with labeling is to make the effort to be truly exquisite with our language usage. To make the effort to be exquisite with our language usage. It's not easy, but when we make that effort, we automatically become thoughtful. We start perspective shifting on all the terms and the words that we use, the conceptions that we employ, how we think, how we talk, how we self-describe, how we describe others, how we describe our world. And suddenly, oh my goodness, our whole world opens up and explodes. And we realize, oh, I'm responsible. When we become truly exquisite, we can change. We can change the world, change how we relate to the world, change how we connect with the world, and change ourselves. So exquisite language usage.
Thank you, Sil. Awesome. I really like that. And so final question for today, and quite important, I think, is, so how can we cultivate empathy and understanding towards individuals who may have been labeled or stigmatized and support their journey towards healing and self-discovery? Share.
Okay, Phil, this is kind of stemming off of what you just said, because I wrote this down earlier. I love this question. How can we cultivate empathy and understanding? My answer to that is really super simple. Be aware of your vernacular, hear them, and just hear them with no expectations. The end.
Brilliant. I love it. That's great. More responses like that, and we'll ask more questions. Paul, you're next.
Know yourself. I think when you understand who you are and you understand that you're a complex individual, you can actually begin to understand and have empathy for other people. It always starts with yourself. But for me, the greatest way for us to cultivate understanding of others Actually, again, heal the self. So the moment we start dropping all of our social masks, all of those ideas and those false concepts that we have about ourselves, we actually release all of the ones that we place on other people. Because whilst we're masking ourselves, we're masking everyone else. We're masking everyone with stories, ideas, concepts, labels, assumptions, beliefs, stereotypes, whatever. If you really want to develop that empathy for other people, unshield yourself, know yourself, open yourself up to your own limitless self, and you begin to see that in other people. I'm going to finish with one other quote I really love. Do you know the thing I love about quotes? You never really know if it's actually written by the person, but there is this quote, and it said, the Buddha said, "You do not need to change the world. Simply change yourself, and the whole world walks up to greet you." And I think when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and shift all those masks, and we see the vulnerability of other people, and we see them for truly as they are, not all of the false preconceived ideas and notions and judgments we have, we see them for who they are. And thus we have empathy because we understand them. And it comes down to as simple as that.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And Sander.
Yeah, I want to add something to what Cher just said from my own experience. And that is, if you are working with someone that is having trauma due to labels or has been stigmatized, is to keep an open mind and don't label anything that they say. Don't think that you know what they've been going through. Just listen and ask open questions so that they have to think about what they are sharing. And if that what they are sharing is their truth, or is that something they started living because someone else told them that. But non-judgmental listening and asking open questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sander. And Anna.
I think for me, the best way that I found to have empathy and understanding towards individuals who've been stereotyped and labeled and are struggling with it is to meet them where they are. And yes, like Sander said, no judgment. I put up a poem yesterday, just something came to me last night and I needed to put it into words and images. And what came to me was that to connect with someone, truly connect with someone, is to, meet them where they are, with all their faults, with all their problems, with all their prejudices, without judging them, without taking anything personally, without the desire to take control, and without the desire to fix them. So, yeah, to just meet people where they're at is really important, and not feel like you have to actually do anything. If you're just there for them and hold space for who they are in that moment, gives them permission to just be who they are and to continue to explore themselves and figure out who they are and how they want to be. Because I think everybody needs this. Everybody needs someone to just accept you as you are in the moment without judgment. So I've found that that's probably the best way to help anyone, is to just meet them where they are. I have a friend who's a coach, and she has no prejudice on who she coaches and their reasons for the coaching, because she says, I meet people in their own world. I thought that was such a beautiful thing to say, to meet them in their own world, because everybody lives in their own little world. And if we come into their lives, if we come into their space with a preconceived idea of what their world is supposed to be, we don't get to see them. We don't get to know them, actually. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
Brilliant points. Thank you, Anna. Jennifer.
I think a great way to cultivate empathy for others and understanding is to have the point of view. I don't know if any of you have ever read The Egg by Andy Weir. Has anyone ever heard of that? Nod your head yes if you have. It's a wonderful short read. It's online. It's like a 5-minute read, but basically it's an interesting theory that we are all different incarnations of the same being. And it's really, really, I mean, obviously, like any other theory, there's no way to prove it true or untrue, but it's possible. And I find that by looking at it that way, it definitely helps cultivate empathy for others. And also, I think it's really important what everyone else said and what Anna said, especially about meeting people where they're at, forming no judgment. If you want to know how they feel about something, ask them and believe them when they tell you. You know, don't assign your own assumption of how that person's experiencing the world. We are all here in the exact same place, having vastly different experiences from one individual to the next. You know, the way we perceive everything around us is so different from person to person. So, yeah, and also looking for similarities between yourself and others helps understand them and respect them, you know. That's all.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Aspirant Sil, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Aspirant Matt. So to cultivate empathy and understanding, to carry on where Sher said, is to utilize capital H hearing. Now, this is a huge topic. I mean, it's the name of the course that I have for coaches on how to be a coach, is to develop this through capital H hearing. But the essence of capital H hearing is to hear the other. So what do you mean to hear the other? I'm listening to somebody else. Actually, if you pay attention to what's happening inside people's heads when they listen to others, they're not so much listening to the other as listening to what they're going to say, what they think about it. Do I agree? Do I disagree? All sorts of stuff, right? But when you can shut all that down and really listen to the other without any expectations or assumptions or ideas, then you really get to hear them. And then that's just step one. And then when they've said what they say, you say, and then what? And then they say more. And you say, then what again? And they say more. And if you want to know what they're saying without having any ideas what they're talking about, truly want to understand, then you are going to get them to really share the fullness of what they have. And the only time that you're going to know when to end this is when they feel heard. And that's determined by them, not by you. And then you're going to be in a situation, because now you're going to get a lot more than you ever even imagined you need to hear in order to capital H hear them. And then, of course, the empathy is going to be automatic, because you'll be completely inside them and their story from their viewpoint, and past all those layers that inhibit from people from sharing to that depth. So we need to make that effort to get there. It's a big deal, capital H hearing, but nonetheless, we can all make an effort. Just the idea of hearing more than just little H hearing or little L listening, just having that idea that there's more, that alone puts us on the road to empathy and understanding.
Thank you. So I capital H hear you. And it reminds me of something I read the other day about the difference between seeing and looking. Yeah. So when you're actually looking, you're really understanding. When you're just seeing it, it passed you by. So Brenda, you are next.
Thank you. Everybody is saying fascinating things, and I was just writing a few notes of what I wanted to say. And as I'm writing it, Anna was saying the words. the exact words, phrase, the whole thing exactly. So what I wanted to say is to help people support their journey towards healing. What I do in my practice, I've learned from a Indigenous shaman here in Canada. And so I've put all of his practices in with my own beliefs. So what I offer to people, and what I think would work for anybody, not even in a shamanic practice or energy healing practice, but just in their own life, is working with anyone as a client or facilitator or friend or companion or anything. No judgment, showing your authentic truth, removing any preconceived notions, which is a ceremony in itself that we do when we prepare. And somebody mentioned that in almost those words, and meet each person where they are now, exactly what I do on their journey, and to remove what no longer serves them, not to fix them. They're perfect exactly the way they are in the journey that they're in, but they want to change. They've come to a change, or they've come to a crossroad, and we just want to remove what no longer serves them, not what I want or what anybody else wants. We hold space for them with love and respect for their individuality to shine. And each person is on their own individual journey. So that's how I practice what I do, but it's a practice that everybody could do with friends, family, anything. Just meet people where they are. And Anna had started to say the exact same things: meet people where they are, respect them for their own being, their own sentient being, and meet them with honesty and respect. And you'll learn so much about them that you don't need any labels. It'll just be an authentic exchange. So wonderful things that everybody's saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. That's amazing. And Don, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did. We're talking about how to deal with people getting stigmatized, or where was my thought?
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
Been a long show.
We're a regular for 2 hours.
We are.
So I don't know. Maybe I should just leave it there.
Yeah, I think everybody made some really good points there. And I think what I've really taken away from today is how aligned we all are on labels, on how we feel about labels and all those kind of things. And I mean, I just want to conclude, and if that's all right, if anybody else got anything to add, does it come back to you, Don?
No, don't worry.
Oh, okay. Anna's got something to add, so she wants to.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I just realized through this conversation that most of my artwork has labels. I use words in my art making.
Interesting.
And yes, and what's interesting about that is that usually an image comes to me, a concept comes to me, and the image comes to me, and the label comes later. It manifests itself through my making of the image, of the object. And so it's kind of like the same thing I do with people. I let people give me their labels, their definition of themselves. And this is the creative process. You have to be curious to be creative. And it's exactly what happens to me as I'm making my art. I am being curious about something that is asking me to be manifested. I am the conduit of that manifestation. So the labels on my paintings are the labels that the paintings themselves reveal to me. Interesting, just an interesting share there about labels.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. You do have a lot of labels on your artwork as well. And if you right, and Don, come back to you.
Yeah, I've got this point. We have already mentioned, like, yeah, it's important to know yourself And I think that's really the only way, that solid way, that people are going to be able to move forward from a situation where they've been misconceived. Yeah, the better they know themselves, the less that they're going to be influenced by the thoughts of others. The more they know themselves and more that they're moving forward with their lives, the better connected they are with their spirit and have that positive energy to hold. So that, yeah, the misperceptions just have little meaning. And it's a lot easier to deal with life when you know yourself. So, yeah, I wanted to highlight that for everyone.
Thank you, Don. That's awesome. So, Still, you want to add something?
Yeah, not just to know yourself, but to have independence of being. That's all I want to add.
Great
Big
ending
difference.
there. Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you to everyone who's watched today, and thank you to everybody who's been on the show today. It's been another amazing show. I can't see Facebook at the moment because I lost my internet, but I'm so thankful that everybody else was still connected to Facebook technology. Hey, so just to conclude, like, labels make sense of our reality. They create our experience, and they can be negative and positive. They help our memory, and they create accurate and easy conversations. They are unavoidable and necessary, and need to be used concisely. Oh, got lost that. So, and labels can be misused, and labels can be dangerous if we attach too much meaning to them. Nobody can define you with a label. You only define yourself. It's not the label, it's how you identify with it. A label should be seen as a guide and not a definitive truth. It's how they're used and how you interpret them, more than them being a bad thing. Challenge your understanding of labels, try and use inclusive labels, and create your own labels. See people as a blank page. Yeah. Don't forget, and this is my own thing, is that we evolved and we created all the labels. We can make them mean anything we want to, and we can learn to use them in a better way. So just don't take them so personally or seriously. Everything is always evolving. Educate people, don't react to people. Okay, so and if you want to be nice to people and actually stop using labels in a bad way yourself, make the effort with your language. Keep an open mind, heal yourself, and take time to listen to people and understand them for real. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, everyone. I can see your comments. I just can't see the video. I can't reply to half of them as well. It's been another amazing show. I look forward to seeing you all next week, when we will be talking about, completely blanked on that one, having what we talk about next week. It's not the greatest good. There's one more before that. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to blank for a minute.
I'll comment on what you said.
It's contagious.
Language, with a quote, language is the one true democracy.
Right, yes.
That means we can change all the labels. We have the power.
Yeah, so the funniest thing is about what the show is next week is, next week we're talking about what is a conscious creator. So I can't believe I forgot that one. So that's a classic one to forget. There you go. We do get blanks sometimes, especially after we've been talking for a long time and we're live. Yeah, that was always my weakness. I'm also live on Food for Thought with Chris Run on Monday, and we're talking about manifestation and healing yourself and spiritual energy. So that's going to be another interesting one. But definitely check in if you can't make Monday, on Thursday, same time, 5 p.m. if you're London. So whatever that converts into your time zone, we look forward to seeing you all.